Chronicles of Hope is essential reading for seekers of inspiration and spiritual empowerment. This series offers nourishment for those on a path of increased awareness at this challenging time. Inspired by higher sources of wisdom, Chronicles of Hope delivers messages to lift your spirit with a roadmap of hope and guidelines for living a life of expanded consciousness. The guides offer powerful insight for mental, emotional, and spiritual growth at this critical tipping point for humanity. The message is clear. We must change. We have the power to raise our vibrational energy individually and collectively before it's too late. I am Lois Herman, author of the best-selling Chronicles of Hope series and host of the Inspiring Hope radio show at WSMN.live or 95.3 FM. You can find me at loisherman.com or chroniclesofhope.net.
The views and opinions of the following show do not reflect those of WSMN, its owners, and/or associates.
Welcome to Inspiring Hope with Lois Herman, a leading expert in professional coaching, clinical hypnosis, and energy clearing. Lois is an award-winning author of Chronicles of Hope. She has decades of experience in advanced hypnosis techniques, has conducted highly effective success coaching programs that have helped clients discover ways to achieve success, empower themselves, their families, as well as holistic practitioners to expand their practices. Get ready to be empowered with your host, Lois Herman.
Good morning and welcome to Inspiring Hope. I am your host, Lois Herman, and I'm here to inspire you with positive messages and celebrate people who are making a difference in our world. When we focus our thoughts and energies on truth, honesty, and integrity, we create powerful shifts that cause us to be more positive and peaceful. As we lift our energy, we empower everyone around us. If we each do what we can to make small shifts in awareness, we create ripples of hope. Join us as catalysts for positive change for our families, our communities, and our world at large. And I hope you are inspired by today's show. And today, we are sharing the 6th session from Chronicles of Hope, the collective book 2. Andrew, I always mess up his name, Periale, is with me again to read the wisdom from the spirit of the earth, Mother Gaia. Her messages for humanity are critically important that we must heed her cautions. One of the important teachings from Gaia is that we must be more aware of what we are doing and make choices based on what is best for our future generations. Come from a place of our heart instead of from greed. And since we're bringing in a large body of energy from Gaia, please join me in establishing our sacred space as the universe shared with us in the last chapter. Let's start by closing your eyes, unless you're driving, and visualize, imagine, or think about 4 columns or pillars of beautiful, shimmering, glimmering, golden white light that dive deep into Mother Earth and extend far up to Father Sky. Let's next add 4 more columns in between so that we're surrounded by 8 columns of glistening light, an octagon of beautiful light with a foundation of light underneath and a magical dome of light overhead. And let's imagine walls of shimmering light connecting all of these magnificent columns. And these walls of light are covered with a shiny mirror reflective coating that allows the positive in and deflects anything negative, transmutes it, and returns it as positive. On the outside of our sacred space, let's invite the violet flame to surround us. Imagine a purpley mist surrounding and protecting us, keeping us in somewhat of a stealth mode, invisible to any outside nefarious distractions. We may even imagine a high-pitched vibrational hum or high-frequency energy on the outside of everything, distracting anything harmful. And then on the inside of our amazing sacred space, let's invite the violet flame to transmute anything that we may have picked up along the way. And now that we've prepared our sacred space, let's invite our spiritual guides to be with us. Today especially, we're inviting Mother Gaia, the energy of Earth, into our space, along with the archangels, Jesus, and whomever you feel called to be here. Make sure they are of the light. And we ask for help with protection, healing, and empowerment across all levels: physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, psychic, social, professional, financial, relational, environmental, technological, political, educational, and more. That we all join together as one, setting the intention for our day to be filled with hope, peace, and joy. You are listening to Inspiring Hope with Lois Herman at WSMN 1590.live or 95.3 FM. Please share these messages, watch the videos on my Lois Herman and Associates YouTube channel or loisherman.com website, and join our Hope community at chroniclesofhope.net. Enjoy this song.
To the animals, listen to the trees, listen to the spirits of the earth, begging us please, stop listening to greed. Listen to the rivers, listen to the sea, listen to the spirits of the deep, begging us please, stop listening to greed. She sent the drought to warn us. She sent the storms to scold us. But we don't listen. We burn and we break and we take and we take and we take till it's too late. Oh, where did the beasts go? Where did the trees go? Where will man go when he has lost the heart? Beneath his feet. Oh, this is our home. She gives us home, Mother Earth. Can you feel her heart beat beneath your feet? Heart beat beneath your feet. Heart beat beneath your feet. Trees, listen to the spirits of the earth, begging us please, stop listening to greed. Listen to the rivers, listen to the sea, listen to the spirits of the deep, begging us please, stop listening to greed. Listen to the animals, listen to the trees, listen to the spirits of the earth, begging us please, stop listening to greed. Listen to the rivers, listen to the sea, listen to the spirits of the deep, begging us please, stop listening to greed.
Beautiful song called Mother Earth by Carlien. And let's start the reading from Chronicles of Hope, the Collective Book 2, Session 6. I am the spirit of the earth, Gaia, your mother. I am the sum of the consciousness of all living things on the planet, all living things, not just humans. Intention. In this session, Gary and I were joined by 3 new participants: Denise and Zeke, my valued clearing consultants, and Gary's friend Linda. Our intention this day was to communicate with the spirit of Gaia, our Mother Earth. In past sessions, every spirit of the collective had expressed great concern for Gaia, and this project had morphed into helping her and humanity. If possible, we wanted to hear from her directly to find out what she needed and how we could best assist her. Our new participants came with some specific questions that we discussed in advance what would be appropriate to ask during the session. In one of the earliest sessions in Book 1, the collective showed Gary a vision of our beautiful blue-green Earth having turned brown and barren in the near future. We wanted clarification on what might have caused this. Were the land and sea brown because of nuclear explosions and war, or from continued neglect? Also, we wondered what was causing Gaia the most pain. Was there anything she could advise to best help her to prevent future harm? What could we do as humans to change our ways to create better outcomes? Was technology good or bad for our society? We had many questions, and we were excited to hear what Gaia herself might say. Conversation. I guide Gary into a state of trance, with the participants quietly observing. When he is noticeably relaxed, I begin the session. Allowing Gary's spirit to step aside for a moment, we are asking Gaia to come through to share with us today. We wish to help alleviate your pain and suffering. We're here to receive your words, your message, your insight, and your inspiration. We are open to hearing what you would advise us to do. Gary sits quietly for a time, then gently stretches his neck, moves his hands, and the spirit seems to take a moment to orient into Gary's body. Hello.
Hello.
Whom may I ask we are speaking with today?
I am the spirit of Earth, Gaia, your mother. Oh.
Well, hello, Mother Earth. Thank you so much for coming today.
There are things you want to know?
Yes, there are many things we would like to know. First, we're sorry for all the pain that humanity has brought to you, and we wish to know how best we can serve you. What can we do to help you?
I know that there are humans among you who care. It is the indifference that hurts more than anything else. So many people are so thoughtless. What can I tell you today?
We've been shown that in some years to come, your beautiful body will be brown and the sky will be toxic.
Yes.
The marine life will die. Is that because of a nuclear war, or is it because the humans are just not taking care? What is the main cause for that change? And we're hoping to learn how to avoid this.
That is just the lack of care, the lack of respect for the planet. There is no catastrophe that I foresee, except that which I may choose to bring.
When you choose to bring catastrophe, is it to specific people for their lack of care?
I don't have the ability to target the individuals who are most responsible for the damage. It's just lashing out as any wounded creature would. My consciousness is not an individual thing. I am the sum of the consciousness of all living things on the planet. All living things, not just humans. Everything that lives is part of me. My feelings at any time are the sum of the feelings of the living creatures on this planet. The more creatures who suffer, the more I suffer. That can produce a resonating effect. The more they suffer, the more I suffer. The more they feel it, and that can spiral out of control, and has many times. It's happening now.
The destruction of the rainforest, the extinction of animals. You're feeling all that pain?
Yes. Extinction is a natural event. More species have become extinct than have ever lived, than are living right now. But the rate of extinction is growing.
What can we do to stop that?
Oh, that is a very complicated question, or at least the answer is very complicated. I wish I could say that there was one simple thing that could be done, but the only... Oh, I'm sorry, this is very hard to put into words. The problem isn't just the destruction of the rainforests or the poisoning of the oceans or the execution of animals for sport. The problem isn't even the use and waste of resources. There are enough resources. The problem is the lack of thought that people have for their actions in general. There is no one action to reverse the damage other than pausing for a moment and considering the consequences of the actions you take. It's a matter of raising the consciousness levels of the humans. Most life on Earth is aware of the complex web of life. Humans refer to a food chain, and that is an overly simplistic view. It is a web. Everything is connected to everything else. Anything you change in one place will have more than one consequence. If humans were more aware of their own interconnectedness with everything else and realized that every action they take has consequences far beyond those they could even foresee, and modified their actions to allow for the consequences they can foresee, well, that would be enough. There are those who realize that their actions are actively harmful and do them anyway. And there are those who witness this and do nothing to prevent it. That level of indifference is what causes more damage than anything else. Some humans think that the task is simply too big, that to clean up the earth is just not possible. For them, that is probably true. But I am capable of healing the earth, provided that the level and rate of damage is reduced. If you think about the history of the planet and myself, it's hard for humans to comprehend time in billions of years. They don't realize how small their span is in the span of all things. I wonder sometimes how many have such an overinflated opinion of themselves, and at the same time realize that their span is an infinitesimal fraction of mine. I can heal the damage. They just have to let me do it. The rate at which they cause harm is greater than the rate at which I can heal. But consider the things that have happened to Earth. The meteor strikes, the loss of the dinosaurs. I healed the planet enough for the human species to arise. In fact, the human species would not be here had the dinosaurs not been destroyed. That was not my doing. But evolution is a punctuated process. It's not a smooth, continuous event. It is a series of small events, each one triggered by either a natural or artificial occurrence. Sometimes it's a random mutation. Sometimes it's an asteroid strike. Clearing away of one species makes room for another. I would never extinguish humanity. However, I would not overextend myself to protect it either. Humans have to realize that they have a place on this world and that they are no more superior to any other living creature than any other living creature is. Just because they have a bigger brain doesn't make them in control. And in many ways, humans are not the most intelligent species on this planet. They need to understand their place and learn to live within it and take only what they need.
One of the questions we have is related to our concern about the food chain and what we eat, as it's crucial to basic human existence. Is there anything we should be doing differently? For example, would it benefit us as a culture to limit our intake of flesh and eat more of a vegetarian type of existence?
Again, that is a very complex question with a complex answer. It is not a food chain, it is a food web. There is no harm in eating land animals or aquatic animals any more than there is harm in eating land plants or aquatic plants. It is only in excess that damage is done. These animals came about as a natural course of evolution. They weren't created for the purpose of human consumption. There's nothing wrong in humans consuming them, but again, not to excess. If all humans suddenly became vegetarian, there would be a shortage of land on which to grow the vegetables and the plants that you would eat. Everything has to be taken in balance. That said, the animals which are raised for consumption, and in fact, even the crops that are raised for consumption by humans or by animals, that process needs to be more carefully managed. It has sometimes been done in a wasteful fashion up until now. When a cow, for example, is slaughtered, all of it is reused. Even the parts that humans don't eat go into fertilizer, feed, and meal. The skin becomes leather. That is an acceptable use. There have been times when that was not the case. When an animal was killed, it was eaten for the parts that it was killed for, and the rest was just left. That is not an acceptable use. But the same is true of the crops that you grow. Some crops are very detrimental to the soil. Tobacco, for example, depletes the soil. Humans do understand crop rotation and the ability to naturally revitalize the soil, but it is easier and cheaper to dump chemicals onto the land. That is counterproductive because those chemicals wash away into the water, and the sea life that doesn't perish from it can become overabundant. You have red tides and algae blooms that are caused by the runoff of the chemicals you thought so beneficial to the land into the water. These blooms can strip hundreds of cubic miles of oxygen from the ocean, and then everything else in the water in that area will die. The things that die degrade and add more fertilizer to the water, and it becomes a spiraling process. I don't need to tell you how to run farms. The knowledge is already there. It merely requires the desire to use it. It requires the desire to spend the extra amount of energy that it takes to do it properly. Humans have a lazy streak in them. They will do things in the simplest possible way to serve themselves without any thought to the consequences of their action. As I said before, consequences have to be considered because they will catch up with you. There is no escaping it. It is a fundamental law of nature, a fundamental law of physics.
I see. So how can we inspire humans to do what is right when they know what is right?
Most intelligent species respond most strongly to fear and to pain. Those are strong motivators. They come from part of the human brain that has not changed much in 100,000 years of evolution. Humans have added more layers to their brain and more complexity, but the reptilian brain is still there. When something hurts you, you learn not to do it. When you fear something, you learn not to do it. Fear of heights, for example, is built into most humans. There are exceptions. Some Native Americans never developed a fear of heights, possibly because of the reverence they have for the land and are used to standing on high and looking around them. But if you can demonstrate to people what's going to happen to them in a way that's undeniable, then their natural preservation instinct will hopefully cause them to do things the right way. There are two problems with this. The first is, how do you make a demonstration in a way that is clear and undeniable? Even the wrath which I lay down periodically is all too frequently dismissed. It would not be my preference to be so blatant and obvious and so destructive as to make it inexplicable in any other way. I don't desire destruction. I cherish all life, as all life is my charge.
And the second problem?
Oh, the second problem is a little more difficult to describe. How do you hurt someone enough to let them know that doing it again will hurt, without hurting them so much that they don't get a second chance? And that's the problem we face. Too many people look at things within their own lifespan. They say, I have only a few years left. What difference does it make what I do to the world? It's not going to affect me. Some of them have children and don't even stop to think, is what I'm doing going to affect my children and their children? They're so wrapped up in themselves, they don't even care about their own families. I have no answer for how to overcome something that is so unique in life. Every other species has more care for their kin than they do for themselves. Humans are unique in their self-centeredness and selfishness. They don't even care about their own offspring's future. I have never faced that issue before. I have no solution to that problem.
So could modern technology and humanity that humanity is so preoccupied with be also a part of the problem?
Well, man-made things are really no different than nature-made things. Anything can be used to good purpose. Anything can be abused to a bad purpose. Humans do tend to excess. Again, that is something that I don't see in any of my other children. Most animals, when they graze, know enough not to kill the plant they eat, to move on to another field so that the plants grow back. Migration patterns are caused by this. Humans must be aware of this and don't seem to care. I find that inexplicable behavior. It isn't that everyone needs to be convinced. It only takes a few to make a big difference. There are, plenty of people who know these things. A very small snowball can turn into a very large avalanche given enough time. And the people who know these things, who speak about them, their voices are not heard. Or worse, they're shouted down by the people who know they're doing damage, but are doing it for profit. There is a solution. If the people who misuse the resources do so because of profit, then the way to get them to change is to attack their profit. If that's all they care about, then that's how you have to strike them. This is an old philosophy, actually, but if the consumers don't buy things that are bad for them, and a lot of the food being sold today is very bad for them, either by deliberate act or carelessness, then the producers will have to change their production. They'll have to change what they sell. The tampering with nature, using genetics, is an example of things with unforeseen consequences. There are things that are going to begin to occur related to genetic modification that humans have done for which they had no foresight, no concept that this was going to happen. And it's not something that I'm going to do deliberately. It is a natural consequence of what they're doing, and it will hurt them. There's nothing wrong with hybridizing. I do that myself. All of nature, the reason there's so many different things is because of natural hybridization, a fair and reasonable process. But deliberate tampering is always going to produce a result that they don't expect. Unfortunately, those results are usually very long-term.
Wow. This gives us a lot to think about. One of the other questions we're curious about is the melting of the glaciers and the resulting ice melt. Is the land going to change as part of this natural occurrence?
Yes.
Do humans need to be aware of how soon that is going to happen and how our coastlines are going to be affected?
I think that most informed people or scientists do have a fair grasp of the time frame involved. I think they underestimate how bad it will ultimately be. Nobody likes to foresee their own destruction. And again, it comes down to the fact that this is not going to happen within the lifespans of the people who are already on Earth. It's the next generations that are going to start to see the side effects. However, man's impact on the environment isn't as great as they think it is in terms of the climate. The climate will change. It will become warmer. Humans were very fortunate to grow up in a time of very moderate climate at the end of a natural glaciation. My life is long. Humans can't see that sort of time span and don't realize that had they come about now rather than 100,000 years ago, their civilization would not have developed the way it did. The climate on this planet, by my standards, is normally much harsher than it currently is. Humans were lucky to have grown up when they did. The climate at the time of the dinosaurs, for example, was one in which humans in their current form could not survive. However, evolution does work, and humans, intelligent creatures, would have come to pass, but they would not be recognized as what we call human today. The problem is that the environmental change will outstrip the pace of evolution. However, there are events that could reintroduce glaciation, large volcanic eruptions, meteor strikes, anything that blocks the sun for any period of time. You see, the history of glaciation is actually very interesting, and I don't think it's something that most of your scientists understand. When there was but one continent, the currents in the ocean, as there was only the one, were unrestricted. This meant that the water from the poles mixed more freely with the water from the equator, with the result that there were no ice caps. And the ice can only form on land, not in mid-ocean. So with no ice caps and with that circulation, the world was a much warmer place. Also, without ice caps reflecting the sun, there was more absorption of what little sun there was in the polar regions. As the continents broke up and reached their current positions, they interfered with that circulation in the ocean. It became more difficult for the cold waters of the poles to move centrally and for the warm water at the equator to move toward the poles. And as the land spread into the polar regions, it formed points upon which ice could form. So the ice did form, which impacted the water's circulation and reflected more solar heat. And that's what caused glaciers to move down almost to the tropics. Only where the sun was overhead most of the year did the ice not reach. As the currents of the oceans stabilized with the continents in the current position, the heat exchange increases and the ice melts, which reduces solar reflection, and so the ice continues to melt. That is a natural process. If anything, the pollution that humans have pumped into the air is more likely to cool the earth than it is to cause heat. That could bring back another glaciation. It is impossible to predict with certainty what will happen and when. There are too many random variables. However, regardless of its impact on climate, pumping pollution into the air is self-defeating. Humans are literally poisoning themselves. The air, the land, the water. They will eventually extinct themselves, or enough of them that it won't make much difference. And then I start again.
Wow. Thank you for that amazing history lesson. One question I know Gary wanted to ask is, are we going to suffer the same fate as Atlantis if we don't do what is being asked of us?
That's a slightly different case, because the Atlantean destruction was almost instantaneous. They didn't heed the advice that they were given, and their destruction was almost immediate. In this case, it's going to be a much more prolonged period of time. There is, as powerful as Atlantis was, it was small compared to the Earth. There is nothing humans can do short of an atomic war that would cause such instantaneous change for the good or for the ill. When you're dealing with a planet, you're dealing with trends, not individual actions. Barring large-scale events like meteor strikes, which could still happen, it's important that humans realize that just because things don't happen quickly doesn't mean their effects are unimportant or important. Starting a trend which is beneficial is worth doing, even if the results are not obvious until several generations later. Humans need to live for their own future, not for their current existence. They need to plan for their future, not their current existence. Things do not change that fast on a planetary scale, but that doesn't mean that every little bit doesn't help.
Thank you. There are some people here today that might wish to speak with you. Linda, Denise, Zeke, do you have any questions? I'm honored to meet you, Gaia. I'm curious how much you intervene in our lives. You're aware of our thoughts as we're all connected, part of the oneness of the planet and the oneness with you. Are you the one who we consider the God of our fathers? Are you the one who intervened with the 10 plagues and guided the Jewish people through the desert?
My consciousness is the sum of the consciousness of every living thing on the planet, not just humans. I am not a guiding force. I am a reactive force. I respond to everything that happens on the planet. I do not dictate what happens to the planet. However, in moments of despair, I have lashed out. There are events that occur that might not have. There are events whose severity might be altered, but I am not the creator of things. In fact, I am created by things. I exist because my children exist. If life on this world were to end, so would I. The plagues are a natural occurrence that clever people wrote into a book and used as an example of what their God was capable of doing. If you look at the plagues and the order in which they occur, one event triggers the first plague. The result of that plague triggers the second. It was a natural occurrence of events. And these clever humans said, oh, we can take advantage of that and use it as a lesson. Many of the things written into the Bible are natural events that were taken and written as examples of God or God's wrath. However, ancient religions and ancient mythologies have done the same thing. The Greeks had the god of the sun and the god of the sea and the god of the land and the god of the underworld. Anything that humans could not understand why it occurred was attributed to a god. There are many religions on earth today, many polytheistic religions that still attribute things to gods. Now, they're not completely wrong. There are spirits that are non-physical. I wonder if you could define me as non-physical, as I am the spirit of the planet. But there are spirits who are non-physical that do interact and interject at critical moments, critical times. In some way, you could call them gods. They are immortal, but they are not the all-knowing, all-powerful beings that are attributed to a god in a monotheistic religion. Taken as a whole, you could call the collective group a god. But still, creation is an accident, not an act of design. Creation comes about through a random, spontaneous event or through a process of evolution. But things are the way they are simply because they are. On other worlds, things probably come up in different ways. I'll talk to the spirits of the collective who can speak to that better than I can. My knowledge is limited to this world.
Thank you. Our time is getting close. Are there any last questions we would ask of Gaia? And Denise said, are there any products or things that we could use in our daily life that are harming you or that you don't want us to use, like styrofoam? Should we avoid anything specifically, or are there things we can do to help you heal faster?
The littering of the surface of the world with stuff that doesn't go away for a long period of time impacts you more than it does me. The things that hurt me are the things that alter my very existence. The stuff on the surface is not an issue, but mercury and lead and all the horrible chemicals, they do leave a permanent scar. Although eventually I will process them and break them down and clean them up. My energy would be better spent elsewhere. As I mentioned before, the overuse of chemicals and fertilizers, genetic modifications, those are things I have more difficulty cleaning up. But remember, my consciousness is the sum of everyone else's. Everything I do is to help the life on the planet because I am the life of the planet. It would just simply be helpful to stop polluting. I can only clean up just so much, just so fast. Humans need to take a part in that cleanup. But more importantly, they need to take a part in reducing the rate at which they do these things. Well, take the rainforest, for example. I can bring them back to what they were, provided humans leave them alone. But once they are destroyed, they're gone forever. There's no possibility of ever bringing them back because it's too interdependent. Humans don't realize that the rainforests are a very delicately balanced organism unto itself, and removing large chunks of it to make farmland won't work because the ground in which rainforests live is not particularly fertile ground. It is ideally suited to the rainforest, but it is not suited to the growing of a single crop. And when the soil becomes depleted, the rainforest is gone. Adding chemicals will increase the productivity for some period of time, but ultimately will cause more damage than it started. There is no one product. It's a matter of trying to live more naturally. That doesn't mean that you have to give up anything that you have. It just means that you should use things in moderation. Eating animals is okay, but fishing to the point of extinction is self-defeating and self-destructive. It only ever requires a little bit of care. Humans pride themselves on being so intelligent. Apply that intelligence, apply that reasoning to these very simple things. No major changes are required. A small change here, a small change there, and that's all it takes. When things start to get better and people start to realize that these changes do have an effect, they'll be more willing to make more changes.
Thank you. Gaia, we appreciate you taking this time with us. Is there any last advice you have to share with us?
All species with any level of intelligence and awareness have first and foremost a survival instinct. In most species, the instinct to survive is stronger than the instinct to even reproduce. There are exceptions, but humans simply don't think of their actions as ultimately going to harm them. They think that I am so large that I can absorb anything they do. And large as I am, that's not the case. There is a point at which I will not be able to protect them anymore. They just don't realize the consequences of their actions. The more care you take of me, the more care I will be able to take of you.
We understand.
Use that to appeal to people's self-interest, since that seems to be what drives them. By destroying me, they are only destroying themselves.
Absolutely. So thank you, Gaia. We will each do our best to personally take and make a difference. And we'll do our best to get your world out to others and hopefully touch others' hearts.
Thank you.
Thank you. We honor you. We will do our best. I gently guide the spirit of Gary to re-enter his body. I have him step into his aura, his energy field, by slowly and gently breathing himself back into full awareness. I asked the clearing consultants to check on his energy to make sure he was completely integrated. They replied that his energy was good. Gary slowly and gently, without any emotional reaction, returned this time. He expressed a feeling of being a little stiff, like in the sessions with Ian Quietus. There was definitely a lot of energy coming through him, although he did not remember anything. He explained that sometimes there was an instant of overlap, as if whomever was coming through was reading his mind. There was not so much overlap this time, and he felt as if Gaia was gone before he came back. The consultants agreed. He laid completely limp for a brief moment before coming back to full awareness to discuss what happened. There's a beautiful poem written by Chief Seattle. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect. All things share the same breath. The beast, the tree, the man. The air shares its spirit with all the life it supports. This session came through in 2018. A lot has happened since then, and we will be discussing the session. I'd like to ask Andrew your first thoughts on this session, as you've helped me to read through it. Do you have any thoughts that you would like to share?
Well, the information that came through Gary was certainly not new to me. Having been around at the first Earth Day, I know that scientists and environmentalists have been warning us about dangers of our overuse of resources. For the 50 years that I've been thinking about it. So this all very much made sense. There is also a kind of tolerance from Gaia that I found interesting, saying, it's fine to eat animals, it's fine to use certain products, but just think about the consequences and do it in moderation.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather used to quote Thoreau quite a lot, and talk about moderation in all things, and also to engage in a kind of simplification of life. Those are certainly things that have meant a lot to me, and it was interesting to hear it come through in this form.
I know the others in the collective have mentioned a lot about returning to the ways of the Native Americans. Gaia doesn't specifically say that, and yet she implies that by honoring everything we do. The Native American culture did honor it, lived off the land, and used all parts of animals or rotated, the crops that were rotated. We know how to do these things. If we can go back to our roots, we'll be able to know how to do this.
Yeah, with that poem at the end by Chief Seattle was stunning in the way it resonated with Gaia's message, the web. Think of life as a web. Everything is interconnected.
It so is. It so is. And I have, if you have one last thought you'd like to share, I have another song, a Native American song, a lullaby that speaks to Mother Earth that we can share. If you have one last thought, Andrew, before we close with another song.
Well, I would just, one of my little mantras is that company is stronger than willpower. We can try and do the work ourselves, but it's become so much easier, more powerful when we work as a group.
That is so true. That is absolutely true. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing, your gift of your voice, your reading, your time, and your wonderful energy. Thank you.
My pleasure. You have been listening to Inspiring Hope with Lois Herman at WSMN 1590 .live or 95.3 FM. Please join us next week for another inspiring show. Until then, look up, stay positive, and be the light in someone's day. God bless.
WSMN 1590. WSMN 95.3 FM Nashua.